Welcome to another live episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 362. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, regular cast of characters, Gail from Communities Digital News, NYFights.com, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, Daniel from 4 Boxing News, Indian Scriber. What's going on, lady and gents?
Time to talk boxing is now. Get on board, everybody.
Absolutely. For those who expected a certain fight to go a certain way, surprise. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, uh, live YouTube show, podcast, blog / site discussing all things boxing. The motto is when the boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. Excuse me. For those want to find out more information, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. If you'd like to email us with questions, suggestions, and whatever, you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you will find links to where to check out Pound for Pound Box Report, links to find us all over social media, be it Facebook / Meta, excuse me, Twitter, Tumblr, IT, as well as links to the YouTube channel, excuse me. Also have links where you can donate, Cash Me and PayPal donation links, as well as links to where you can find us all over the podcast realm, where other podcasts are available. Last but certainly not least, still got the links to the Beachbody on Demand. Strongly suggest, as we're inching closer towards the summer, if you want to get your body right, you want to change a body change, mindset change, if you just want to improve your overall health and wellness, please check out Beachbody on Demand's basically any fitness goal that you have in mind. You will find a program for it on Beachbody on Demand. They offer a 14-day trial, 2-week trial. That is, for 14 days, you get free access to any and all programs on Beachbody on Demand, whether it be the 645, the 6 weeks of the work, PIO, morning meltdown, bar blend, the old school P90X series, the old school Insanity series, so many programs. If you're looking for a boxing based program to be specific, 10 rounds, um, 6 week program, 5 days for 5 days a week of workouts. 3 of those days consist of boxing based cardio, 2 days a week devoted to resistance work / weightlifting. Or if you're looking just a program in which you want to pump iron, please check out Lift 4, be it the regular Lift 4 series or the updated Lift 4 series that's set to drop this summer. So yeah, Beachbody on Demand, I strongly suggest you give it a try. Let's get going by recapping the fights. One main fight I want to focus on, and it's been, unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you know the results of what took place May 7th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Dmitry Bivol stepped in the ring to defend his WBA lightweight title against Canelo Alvarez, and like I said, to the surprise of many, um, hence the name of this particular episode for those who are checking us out live or listening to us later on podcast. Not according to plan. Bivol ended up defeating Canelo by unanimous decision. Screw the scorecards, which were 115, 113 across the board. The fight was not that close. I had it 10 rounds to 2. Just checking out the fight, checking out boxing Twitter, boxing social media. Most either had it 10-2 or 9-3 in favor of Bivol. And I go to you, Gail, ladies versus always. Canelo over the years is more calculated in his approach, more tactical fighter, right? And because of that, he gets off to a slow start. He's done that in a series of fights now over the last couple of years, particularly since he's gone up to 168 pounds. And now this fight is up at 175. Well, Bivol took advantage of that, got off to the early lead. The movement, the jab was outstanding. I was disappointed in how Canelo fought. There didn't seem to be a plan B. He seemed to lack that that spark, the sense of urgency. While Bivol was determined, he was on it all night long, tattooing Canelo with combinations doing a beautiful job of sides of angle stepping around. The base this look, we talked about it last week with Shakur. We talked about it 2 weeks ago with Wilder Fury. The plan was pretty basic. Jab, get going with the jab, step around, get the combinations off so Canelo couldn't get to him. And he stuck to that script for the rest of the night. Canelo had no answers, even when he tried to step it up and say 9 round or 10. Bivol was like, okay, that's all you got. Bivol, in fact, was the stronger fighter, while Canelo seemed to get fatigued. Uh, Overall, surprising to many. I felt that Bivol had this in him. Just wasn't sure he was going to get the benefit of the judges. He did. In the end, Yale, dominant by Bivol.
Really an impressive performance. And the truth is, it didn't surprise a lot of us. But what surprised us was how dominant he had to get ahead of those Las Vegas judges. You're right, Michael. Canelo got off to his usual slow start, but not if you ask the three judges who all scored four, all of the first 4 rounds, 1 through 4. Every one of the three judges scored rounds 1 through 4 for Canelo.
That's ridiculous.
Every single one. So Bivol was digging himself out of a hole, unbeknownst to him. Didn't matter to him. He, his trainer Gennady Mashianov, and with the help of Joel Diaz, where they trained in Indio, put together a game plan built around Bivol's strengths. Bivol was never going to outmuscle Canelo on the inside. He did not want to get into a brawl. We knew Bivol had a tremendous, very tactical, effective jab, second only to Gennady Golovkin, although right now you might say he was first about the whole thing. But he also corrected what we all thought was going to be a problem, which was following the jab with power punches. His right hand was busy. He threw combinations. And as the fight went on, his combinations got quicker, more snap, more numbers. And he started wearing Canelo out. When's the last time we saw Canelo show this kind of fatigue? It was not only the hands, it was the feet. If you get a chance to go back and watch the fight, focus less on the action from the waist up and look at the feet. Very impressive footwork, very impressive ring generalship. And Canelo could do nothing about it. And for once, it turned out being bigger was an advantage because Bivol took what shots Canelo threw and landed well. And Canelo landed, frankly, very few flush shots because Bivol's footwork, movement, guard, very effective defense allowed him to evade most of those punches or catch a lot of them. If you saw the immediate interview on DAZN after the fight, Bivol showed his arm and said, yeah, my arm's killing me, but he hit my arm. He didn't hit my head, and that's better. That really summed up a lot of the fight in a very simple way. It was just the perfect game plan delivered to perfection. On the other hand, Canelo kind of retread the game plan he's used in the last few fights that worked against Callum Smith, that worked against Billy Joe Saunders. This guy was a completely different puzzle to solve. And why Canelo and Eddie Reynoso didn't adjust before the fight or were unable to adjust during the fight, they're going to have to ask themselves some hard questions. Was it simply the fact a guy in front of them was bigger? That's going to be the excuse. I don't buy it for one, because Bivol is not a big light heavyweight. When we asked Eddie Hearn after the fight whether they'd gotten on the scales the day of the fight to see what they'd rehydrated up to, apparently they didn't. But Eddie Hearn estimated that Canelo had probably rehydrated to 180 and Bivol to 185. 5 pounds is not a big difference at that weight. So playing the guy was too big card, I don't buy it. But I'll tell you the reason why people like me and a lot of others didn't think the fight would go to Bivol is exactly what we saw from the judging. Canelo Alvarez did not win the first 4 rounds of that fight. I had him even, and I was being fairly generous to Canelo. Bivol had to win 9, 10, 11 rounds of that fight to barely get the victory. If Canelo Alvarez had won the 12th round, it would have been a draw. That's how close the judges had it. That is ridiculous. Nevertheless, it should not take away from what Bivol accomplished. An absolutely tremendous result for him and for his team. And it's going to be very interesting then what comes next. Boy, your title for this podcast this week, Not According to Plan, is about the truest title we've had in months. And there are a lot of dominoes that are going to follow different direction now. As Bivol said to Eddie Hearn, sorry, I messed up your plans. He did. He messed up his plans. He messed up a lot of plans. There are going to be a lot of fights we thought we were going to see in the back half of 2022, completely in flux, both in the super middleweight division and the light heavyweight division. And some are going to filter down to middleweight as well. You know, the cards are going to shuffle. And there are a lot of options. I've got my opinion on those, but I'll hold it until we get there. And Michael, you're on mute.
Sorry, everyone. I was on mute. I was running my mouth. I thought I was off mute. But give a shout out to my brethren over at Three Kings Boxing. Please check out threekingsboxing.com, your source for pure, unadulterated boxing information. During their pre-fight, to your point about the scores, they made a point that, shout out to 2K, head of Three Kings, Bo, head of media relations, senior writers, Bakari, Jarrell, aka Big Cool, editor Red, as well as myself, I write for them as well. 2K and Bo mentioned, to your point about the scores, Gail, that Bivol could do this, but they felt that he was going to fight he's going to be fighting from a deficit, and they predicted that he's going to begin the fight. Once the bell rings, he's going to be 4 or 5 rounds behind. And as you reported here just now, that turned out to be the case. And if you was wondering what was that noise you heard in the background, it was Gail's dogs, her boxers raising hell about the scorecards, because look, Bivol got the win technically, but if you look at the scores, he barely got the win. The judges, that was atrocious. 5 rounds. I don't know what's worse, the fact that they gave 5 rounds to Canelo, or Canelo during the post fights claiming that he won, and he felt that Bivol only won like 4 rounds of that fight. But anyway, well, it's going to be interesting what happens next. We'll talk about that in a bit. I'll go to you, Jacob and Daniel. Hope to have Daniel back. He had to step out for a second. Not only give your assessment of what went down and Bivol's performance. Also, let's talk about Canelo here. In my breakdown, I talked about my disappointment in Canelo. Gail noted the footwork or lack thereof of Canelo. Was this win good Bivol, bad Canelo, Jacob, or a combination of the two?
I'm probably going to have an unpopular opinion here, but I think, I haven't been high on Canelo for a long time. It's kind of perplexed me, and I'm not saying that he's not a good fighter. I think he's a good fighter, and he's definitely gotten better from his we'll say post Mayweather days to his current status. And he has done some incredible, legacy things. So I'll give him credit for that. But I just never really thought he was as great as everybody was touting him to be. And it just seemed like every time his opponent was in the ring with him, it kind of reminded me back in the days of Mike Tyson, where they had already lost before the fight had started. They bought into this aura of Canelo is can't be beat and he's the best and blah blah blah. And they would, fighter after fighter after fighter, they would basically play into Canelo's game and not fight their fight or not use the attributes that they have or use the game plans that they had used in previous fights. And in this case here, Bivol was very, he was just very smart about how he approached and won this fight, and clearly won this fight. He dominated this fight, regardless of what the scorecards say. And to go back to what Gail said, it wasn't just the first 4 rounds of the scorecard. All 3 scorecards were identical. Every single round that was scored for Canelo and then scored for Bivol were all the same on all 3 cards. I never see that happen. There's always usually one that's, lopsided for this person and this one lopsided for this one.
That should be an investigation.
I mean,
if that being the case, I didn't know. But yeah, there should be some kind of investigation. That's a fix.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what you guys were, you were saying earlier. It's like, were these scorecards already turned in at before the fight had, even started, so to speak, like they already filled out? Because again, to Gail's point, I mean, I didn't give Canelo any. I think maybe I can like she said, be generous, give him a round in the first 4, but no way he won all 4 of the first rounds. Like it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But to go back to your original question, Canelo, I think in a way he's kind of him and his camp are kind of their own worst enemy. I think they really believed into this hype that because they had been winning their fights, doing what they've been doing, like, having effective aggressiveness, but like kind of trying to draw their opponent in, like Canelo tried to do, go on the ropes, and wave them in and like, try to look for the counters. But Bivol, credit to him and his team, he didn't fall for it. He knew what Canelo was trying to do. And I think as the fight started to progress, and Canelo did land some decent shots, not a lot, but he landed some decent ones. Most notably the uppercut, when he would maybe even trap Bivol on the ropes and then unleash an uppercut. But it didn't seem to like hurt him. Like I never saw Bivol even like hurt once or like show a sign of being wobbled or hurt. And I think a part of it has to do with he's campaigned at light heavyweight for a long time. His I think his whole professional career. So he's not he's kind of like a Golovkin where he's stayed at that same weight for a long time, as opposed to Canelo, who's come up from lighter weights to as high as light heavyweight, and even talked about going to that's cruiserweight. But Bivol had the right game plan. He didn't get drawn into Canelo's kind of thing, and then as the fight progressed and he saw that he could take Canelo's power and that there was really nothing to figure out. Canelo was just throwing big shots, hoping to land something. He didn't really have a bunch of combinations, or he wasn't really doing like his normal, finish with the body work kind of stuff. He started to get closer and closer to Canelo, and he actually started to kind of be like head to head and was, kind of just thinking, and when he would see his openings, he would just kind of let out a flurry and he would connect on Canelo. And I don't think Canelo was really hurt, but Bivol is not like one of what I would call like a one punch, knockout, artist. He's like kind of you know, he has good skills, sometimes fights to his level of competition, you know, so, and doesn't really, you know, go for the finish sometimes, you know, like when he probably can, or he probably has the opportunity to, but he just fought the perfect fight, you know, and he did what, you know, I wished so many other opponents of Canelo would have done. And then, you know, the whole thing with Canelo, like I said, I just think him and his team, because they have been winning and winning and winning and getting through, you know, these fights, and, you know, most of the time, you know, winning by late stoppage, they just thought that this was going to be the recipe forever. And, you know, that the Reynoso, you know, they're on tough times lately. You know, they 2 weeks in a row, their fighter got washed. You know, their fighter got washed by, you know, the opposition in Vegas. And, you know, I forgot about this. I saw this on another thread that I think what Andy Ruiz ended up leaving, you know, got Ryan Garcia left, and then Martinez lost, you know, to he got washed also by Gonzalez. So, you know, I don't know. The magic isn't there anymore, in my opinion. Sometimes, you know, your fighters kind of raise your camp, but it's not necessarily like, I don't think the training or the strategy. It's just those fighters, you know, basically because they're winning or whatever, they can't give a lot of credit to the camp. But you know, I don't know, that it's disappointing. I almost wish that they would have given the fight to Canelo, just so that there would be some outrage. But, you know, I think because they gave it to the right guy, you know, obviously all the Canelo fans are sad, but you know, I think you can take a poll, and most people know that he lost that fight. Not just lost it, but he lost it badly.
Yeah, I've even heard Canelo fans have to concede and acknowledge afterwards on chat rooms and message boards and threads, as you mentioned, Jacob, that the guy lost. Their guy lost. Follow up here before I go back and open up the questions for everyone. Um, you talked about Canelo and his team felt they were just everything was just going to be laid. The carpet was going to be laid down for them, essentially. The old Marvin Hagler quote: "It's hard to stay hungry when you sleeping in silk pajamas." Ironically, Canelo during the pre-fight, whether his appearance at Stevenson Valdez or his appearance at pre-fight presses for this specific fight, looked like he was wearing a getup that looked like silk pajamas here. Uh, has Canelo lost the hunger? Has he gotten content, Jacob?
I think, well, I don't know if that he's gotten content, because I'll give him, like, again, I'm not a big Canelo fan, but I'll give the devil his due in the sense that he is at least trying to do, you know, different things, you know, right? You know, his plan was to win this fight, and some would, you know, we can talk about, you know, possible corruption, you know, maybe this, you know, maybe the judges or whatever they paid off, or the deal they had, maybe they didn't know that he was going to, you know, make it that close. Because if they would have done a draw or something like that, it wouldn't go down as a loss, right? But I think sometimes these guys can believe in their own hype, especially when they have a bunch of yes people around them, especially when the media is around them saying, you're the pound for pound best, and look at all the stuff that you did. You know, you unified the division, you did this, you did that, blah, 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 blah. Then you start to kind of believe your own hype, and you think that, you know, you're going to get bailed out. You know, let's not forget, you know, Canelo has had the benefit of many fights where the scorecards go in his favor, right? You know, when he fought Triple G, he had that 118, 110 card. Lara, 117, 111. Mayweather, which he totally lost. He had a 114, 114. That was a split decision win for Mayweather. It wasn't a unanimous decision win, even though we know he lost that fight. And, you know, even against Kovalev, I think he had at the time of the stoppage, it was 95-95, and he was losing on the two other cards. So he's had this advantage of having, they always seem to side for him. And like, something that Gail said kind of sparked this thing in me where she said, I was being generous, by giving him, I think she said two rounds or whatever. And now that was being generous. It's like, are we under the mystique of this, this person? And then we just say, like, when there's a close round or when there's a round, oh, well, I'm just going to give it to him because I'm being generous to him. Like, is that how the judges are kind of, doing things? Are they kind of wrapped up into this, what's so-called greatness and, kind of get blinded by this? Like, I think we are kind of, in a way, we give him the benefit of the doubt because he keeps on winning and does all these things. And so you kind of, sometimes don't always see the forest for the trees, so to speak.
I don't think you're saying, Jacob, that I handed over rounds on my scorecard to Canelo.
No. I'm not saying. I'm not questioning your integrity, Gail.
We'll just clarify that. It is true that judging is somewhat, beyond the basics, and eye of the beholder. And I couldn't help but wonder as I watched the fight ringside, were the judges more impressed by the activity and the skills of Bivol, which are finer skills to discern, or when Canelo was power punching, and he would land a decent shot. Sometimes it was very tough to tell. Was it flush? Was it not? It depends on what side of the ring you were on, whether you see it. The truth is the judges often see less than the television audience does. And of course, my dogs have been quiet for an hour until right that minute.
Again,
well,
they raising hell at the judges.
Killing me. That makes it tough. But I also kept thinking through the whole fight, and especially at the end when we found out what the judges' scores were, boy, it shows, I believe in retrospect, an even brighter light on the miscarriage of justice in the first fight with Golovkin. Most people have believed for years he clearly won. Now we see these scores where there was an even greater disparity of skill, that Bivol won without question and barely got it on the scorecards. Golovkin fought Canelo closer and lost. That's how much margin you need when you're fighting with Canelo in Las Vegas, where clearly he's favored. Judges are human. The audience is with him, clearly, although even they became quiet in the second half of the fight, which I have never seen in a fight with Canelo Alvarez. But this is going to color what Canelo decides to do next. There is a rematch clause. Bivol really is the one, as the champion, who controls it. He is very willing to do a rematch. Canelo claimed he wants it. I don't think, in retrospect, that's going to be the case. I think he's going to go for the bigger money and the softer touch in his mind, which is Gennady Golovkin. And in that case, what does Bivol do? Well, I'm sure he's got another mandatory somewhere out there, but he's also got the potential of fighting the winner of the Artur Beterbiev Joe Smith Jr. fight. What's interesting is that Bivol's already beaten Smith once. Beterbiev is on the downside of his career, and I think Bivol has a darn good shot of beating him and becoming potentially the unified light heavyweight champion.
Let's keep it a buck here. Canelo there's favoritism with the judges in Canelo going back a decade now. In his only other loss to Floyd Mayweather in 2012, Mayweather won that bout as he won that bout as clearly as Bivol won this bout, right? 9-3, 10-2 on the scorecards. You could even consider that he won by a greater margin, Floyd, than Bivol did. But yet, when it came to the scores, one of the judges had that fight a draw. Over and over and over throughout Canelo's career, whether it's Arizlandi Lara, which is one of these hills that I will die on and insist to my dying day that Laura won that fight, whether it's Austin Trout, whether it's the first fight that you mentioned, Gail, with Golovkin. This dude has gotten the benefit of the doubt. And if you don't know, if you didn't think so back then, you would have to concede that point now, because there's no hell well way that he won 5 rounds against Bivol. No, no. And if you try to make an argument with me, you're not only lying to me, you're lying to yourself. So that's point number one. Let's move on to point number two here. Excuse me.
If it's not
I'm
phones,
sorry.
it's dogs, it's
I'm
everybody wants
sorry.
to
The
interact.
phone was ringing. But yeah, more to that. More, let's get to the future here. You mentioned there is a rematch clause. Bivol wants it. Shoot, he's even willing to go down to 168 pounds, because Bivol, after this win, uh, the chip on his shoulder is even bigger now in the aftermath of this fight than it was before. He says, "Okay, I just beat you here. I got my belt. I'm willing to move down to 168 and beat you down there for all of your belts. So whatever's clever." In the post fight, Alvarez and Reynoso strongly suggested that they want the rematch, but and I'll get it in, but there is still that proposed offer that was kind of on the table, or many thought that would happen, and that is a September fight with Gennady Golovkin. Put it here on the table for you, Gail and Jacob. While they may say Canelo, Bivol too, from a financial perspective, given the investment that DAZN has made in Canelo, given the fact that this fight was a pay-per-view, what was it, $59.95? No way it should have been a pay-per-view, much less for that price. They got to recoup that money somehow. While Canelo's camp may say Bivol rematch now, do you think that once things have settled down and weeks have gone by, that we will actually see that rematch, and instead Canelo will go ahead with that September proposed fight trilogy with Golovkin?
I'm 100% convinced that Canelo will not go directly to the rematch. I think the money and his odds of winning are, in his mind, so much better with Golovkin. And he, even though he's technically got a draw and a win on the record, he hears the chatter. He knows. He reads everything. He would like to put a stamp on that and shut it down. And when the paycheck is so big, why wouldn't he? Then, if he makes Bivol bide his time, Bivol is going to want to capitalize, and he does have that opportunity potentially to fight. I believe it will be his countryman Beterbiev who will win, although maybe not. And then he's got a unification fight ahead of him, which is very attractive, very makeable between Top Rank and World of Boxing. And believe it or not, Kathy Duva is still a co-promoter of Bivol. I think that's the direction that we'll go, and that's what we'll definitely see. Bivol was also fairly pointed in the post-fight news conference after the fight privately, saying, listen, next time I want to be treated like the champion. Canelo walked in last. Canelo got all the fanfare, the fireworks, the live band.
Even the official hashtag on Twitter, Canelo's name was first.
Right. He was the challenger, folks. These were not for any belts he held. And Canelo is still the unified super middleweight champion, which is still a very impressive accomplishment. Let's not downgrade that. He's due respect for everything he's done to this point. But Bivol said, listen, I went along because I wanted the opportunity. He wanted this chance He bet on himself and he won. He even laughed that, he was very happy for everybody who bet money on him and won a lot of money because of the odds being so against him. And there was not, there was not just a little xenophobia going on, because we heard the Mexican national anthem, we heard the American national anthem, and then crickets, no anthem for Bivol, because they would have had to play the Russian national anthem. He was not introduced as being from St. Petersburg, Russia. He was born in Kyrgyzstan, but he has grown up in St. Petersburg. He was introduced as being from Indio, California, which is where Joel Diaz's camp is where he trained for this fight. That is rather ridiculous. It really is. So, Bivol said in his own very polite, lighthearted way, I am the captain now. And he is. Canelo is going to have to decide what to do. I think he's going to walk away from the rematch. I might be proven wrong, but we're going to find out soon enough.
Unfortunately, I disagree. I think Gail makes a bunch of great points, as she always does. I don't think for Canelo, as far as the money, I don't really think it's about that anymore. This guy has tons of money already. And I'm not saying he doesn't like money and he wouldn't take a money fight. He's not fighting for free, but he's in a position now where he can sign these 1-fight deals, 2-fight deals, or even if he did take the rematch, it's not like he could lose the rematch and still people want to see him. He still has a fan base. He can basically fight, a Charlo or whoever and still get a ton of money. Like those fights are going to be there for a while as far as money is concerned. I also think that this rivalry with Triple G, I think it was kind of a means to the end in this, as far as the deal was. So he seemed to be more about like accomplishments and legacy. So this whole thing of fighting Triple G, I don't think he wants to fight him a third time. Not because he thinks he's gonna lose or he's afraid he's gonna lose, but because he's done with that, that chapter of his life. And it's really, Triple G's coming up. It's a super middleweight fight, but he's already the unified champ. What he was trying to do here was take the belt off Bivol and then be the unified, fight the winner of Smith and Beterbiev and become the unified light heavyweight champion, right? So be unified in 2 divisions. So that more of a legacy fight, but of course that didn't happen. Maybe a little bit surprised to himself because of all the stuff that we talked about before. So I have a feeling that he will either go do the rematch, but the only things that could potentially, derail it are the things that Gail said. Now that Bivol won and he is the champion, and he said he's gonna, the negotiations are gonna have to be different. He conceded on everything that the Canelo team wanted, everything DAZN, all Eddie Hearn, all the stuff that they wanted. He did it, whatever they asked. But this time it's gonna be different. He's gonna want a better deal for himself because he won, he's the champ, and so he deserves that, right? He's in the driver's seat now. So if Canelo doesn't want to concede a few things, then then you can have a problem there where, okay, they can't make the fight. But I actually think that another way Canelo could go about this is, instead of doing the rematch and instead of fighting Golovkin, he can petition to fight the winner of Smith, Beterbiev, and try to win that fight, pick up 3 belts, and then fight Bivol for the rematch for all the belts. So it's a different way to go about it, but getting to the same place that he wants to get, because I really do think it's not about the money fights anymore because he has the money. It's about the legacy. He wants to put his stamp as to go down as, somebody that has done these accomplishments. So I think the original goal of being the light heavyweight unified undisputed champ is still the goal. So he has a couple options there. The Gennady-Golovkin fight, I don't think is of any interest to him. He's about challenging himself. He said it as much, and every time they've brought up the Golovkin stuff, I know he signed the deal to do it, but he doesn't seem that excited about it. Like, it doesn't hold any like real. He's always said, "Oh well, if the fans want it, then I guess we can do it." But that's about all he says.
I see Daniel is back with us. Daniel from For Boxing News and Ian Swiber. Quick word on your quick analysis of the fight, as well as we've been talking about what's next for these two, for Canelo, Bivol. Excuse me, I haven't made the mistake. Bivol and Canelo, my apologies. Will we indeed see a rematch between you two, or will Alvarez go for other options, namely keeping that September date with Golovkin?
Well, first, whatever beef that StreamYard has with Verizon needs to stop.
Wow.
Second, when it came to the fight, what was very interesting to me was, and this was one of my things that worried me about last week when it came to Bivol, was how he was going to handle being the bigger guy. Because normally he's either the same size or smaller than most of his opponents. He's used to being the smaller guy. So when it came to imposing your will with the jab, with the combinations on Canelo, I was wondering if he wouldn't be used to being the bigger guy, but he did fairly well. He established his jab early on, didn't stop with the jab, and landed good combinations. And a sign that, because it's been light heavyweight for most of his career, he's built up a good amount of muscle mass. The hits that Canelo was able to land on Callum Smith, that gave him those gigantic bruises on the biceps, were not as impactful on Bivol this time around. And tactically, from the footwork to the range, Canelo was never really able to establish good combination distance. And a lot of the punches that he had were not flush. So at the end of the day, we almost got the Vegas decision, but luckily the right man actually won. Now, considering what's next, I've actually been thinking about this all day, because there is very different paths around it if you're with Canelo or with Bivol. One way you can do it is you can try to honor the contract that you signed, take the third fight with Golovkin, make the money that you need to make, and then come back to the Bivol fight. Or, like Jacob mentioned, go towards the winner of Joe Smith versus Artur Beterbiev, be that guy, and then make the rematch with Bivol undisputed. Here's the problem with that, unfortunately. And I'm going to drop, unfortunately, a little bit of an analogy here. I think we're all pretty familiar with like the urban legends and stories of certain sparring sessions. And granted, last week, one of them came up with us on IG. Like, Mike, I think I sent it to you. I sent it to you and Gail. And it was mainly of the sparring session in 1999 between Floyd Mayweather and Paul Spadafore.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that is so infamous is because Floyd, after I think the third round of the sparring session, was befuddled by Spadafore.
Not befuddled and just worn out.
Yep.
Out of gas.
Yep. And folks, if you don't believe me, there's the actual sparring session is now on YouTube. I don't know who put it up, but somebody actually put up the entire sparring session. There is a sparring session in Canelo's career that is just as infamous, but we haven't seen tapes of it yet. That's a sparring session with one Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, who presents the similar problems that Bivol did as far as size, as far as range, and as far as skill. Well, I know we're going to talk about him in the preview, but through some WBA magic, we now know that should Zurdo win his fight, he will become the mandatory for Dmitry Bivol. So if Canelo goes that route, trying to get the light heavyweight titles through Beterbiev or Smith, that frees up Bivol for that mandatory shot against Zurdo. And that's going to be an interesting fight because he'll be once again presented with a situation where he'll be the smaller guy. And with somebody like Zurdo who can handle a punch too. So what happens if, I know we're speaking on that, but what happens if they make the fight with Zurdo and Bivol and Zurdo wins? Now Canelo's presented with that very bout that he put in 2019, where he said he would never fight another Mexican for a world title. Were you going to keep your word? Or will you try to challenge history, be undisputed in two separate weight divisions that a Mexican never has to do it, but you have to fight a Mexican to do it? Interesting timetables, but more than likely, they'll probably, if they're smart, they'll probably run it back. It'll probably still be in Vegas. It'll probably be in Allegiant Stadium. And Canelo will probably come in a little bit more prepared this time around, but Bivol will come in with the confidence that he knows not only that can he beat him, he can beat the scorecards too.
It'll be interesting to see the next moves, what develops in the aftermath of this. Will they go ahead and fight a rematch? Will Canelo take other options? Ironically enough, you mentioned Zurdo Ramirez. Yours truly had the pleasure to interview him for Three Kings Boxing. Myself and Bo, we interviewed him last week. You can check that out on threekingsboxing.com or the Three Kings Boxing Facebook page for video of the full interview. So yeah, surprise to many. Like I said, I thought Bivol could do this. Thankfully, he got the favor of the judges, barely. I still say there should be a formal investigation because, yeah, for them to have score the same rounds the exact same way across the board, the fact that this fight was so close, that's not right. Canelo can improve, and I believe he will, but Bivol, to your point, Daniel, he's going to have more confidence in the aftermath of this, and the way he's talking, I'm not mad at him one bit. That he wants full respect for the rematch, aka more money, and we'll see if it happens again. We'll see. We'll keep you updated here on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Let's move on to some news here. Not much in the news segment. If you want to add some more stuff, Gail, Daniel, Jacob, by all means. During the interim between last episode and this episode, got an update on the status of Kell Brook. As most boxing fans know, Kell Brook last time out gained arguably the sweetest win of his career as he stopped longtime rival Amir Khan in 6 rounds. I believe that bout took place in February. There were questions on what Brook would do next. There were options on the table for him to fight top welterweight prospect, contender, Conor Benn. There's also talk about Brook fighting Chris Eubank Jr. at a catch weight. Well, Brook has decided to call it a day. Age 36. He's basically said he has no more to prove. He's done everything. He's content with his career. Quick comment from anyone here. your reaction to Kell Brook deciding to say no mas?
For once, a fighter made a good decision when to step out. It happens so rarely. But, I'm sure Brooke was tempted to go for one more fight since he performed so well against Khan. But it was Amir Khan. That was a good way to go out. It was a fight that the British public had really wanted to see. He gave it to him, and he's smart to step away now. He has a very fragile face with those reconstructed orbital bones. And
Yeah.
this was the right decision for him, his family, and his future. Good for him. I will never forget seeing Kell Brook upset Sean Porter in Carson at StubHub to everyone's utter shock. And I've rarely seen a fighter so emotional at a win, along with the rest of his team. Jimmy Lennon Jr., upon announcing the result, read the scores and paused. He gave it a very dramatic pause. There was a sizable British crowd there. And in the pause, somebody audibly yelled, "And the new." And then Lennon said, "And the new." And Brook dropped to his knees. A wonderful moment in boxing. Felt terrible for Sean Porter, but damn it, he lost that fight. So I personally will remember Kell Brook very fondly. He probably, in retrospect, shouldn't have stepped up against Golovkin, but damn, that took some big brass ones, and much respect to him.
I have no more to add to that. Gail basically wrapped my thoughts in her comments. Daniel, Jacob, quick word.
This was hopefully the end of one of the more interesting careers that you've seen in recent memory when it comes to the welterweight division, because Brook was, as a skill set, he was always regarded as some of the best in the division, but he never probably got his due, because after beating Porter, he unfortunately did fall along the line of the IBF carousel of the mandatories. The fight like the Jojo Dans of the world, where you never really got to see his skills again in full display. And hopefully, like I said, he'll be remembered for the fight that he took with Sean Porter and how he took the title on the road. Unfortunately, I do know that some people will more likely remember him for losing to Gennady Golovkin, despite the fact that we should look at it as him challenging himself, going up 2 weight divisions to fight Golovkin. And ultimately, like I said, losing to Errol Spence. But he at least got to go out and he closed that chapter with Amir Khan. That chapter has been around in UK boxing for a decade plus. It was always discussed. There was always a possibility people were going to be arguing back and forth, but at least they fought, they ended it, and good on Brook for leaving now before he did, because we all heard the rumors before that there was a chance that Eddie Hearn was trying to feed him to Conor Benn to solidify Ben's credentials. But he took the wise decision, and he is deciding to step away. Hopefully he stays away. Like Jacob always mentions, nobody really should believe a boxer when he says he's retired. But in this case, hopefully it remains true.
And I don't know if Jacob's going to give a quick word here. So,
No, I don't. I mean, you guys said it all, and then Daniel said the thing that I would say is that, well, we'll give it a 6 months, and hopefully he stays retired.
yeah, indeed. News broke shortly before we hit the record button for the show that the WBC has ordered a fight between Ryan Garcia and Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz, last time we saw him, was just a couple of weeks ago. He just on the undercard of Spence and Ugas just took apart and had his way with Gamboa. Ryan Garcia made his long-awaited return to the ring a couple of weeks ago as well. These two had tried to make a fight before. Simple question is, now that the WBC has formally ordered them to get in the ring, will we see the fight this time? Yeah, are we actually going to see this fight now as opposed to the failed negotiations that took place a few months back?
You are absolutely going to be seeing this fight. The last few weeks, Ryan Garcia has done a lot of interviews on podcasts, and he has hinted at this fight more than once. Oh, I'm going to have a great fight coming up. The fans are going to be excited. He was even asked by, I believe it was Chris Mannix, is the opponent shorter than you? And he laughed. Does it rhyme with? He's all but telegraphed this is a done deal. So get ready, folks. It's a done deal.
Yeah, and it looks like he's talked about how he's going to return to the ring. I want to say August 16th, I believe it was. And yeah, to your point, Gail, I've also heard similar things from Garcia. So it looks like hopefully this fight will happen. Going to you, Gail, and going to you, Jacob and Daniel. Given how Cruz looked against Gamboa and in his loss to Tank last year, how do you see this matchup?
It'll be an interesting one. For the skills that I think that Cruz has, the one thing I don't like about his style is that he sometimes wings his punches and leaves himself open. So I think that's kind of the only dangerous thing. I just hope he has a more disciplined approach to this fight than, to then just trying to knock his guy out. I don't know if it was because it was Gamboa and who shouldn't have been in the ring to begin with, but yeah, I'm hoping that he can at least make it competitive and we see a good fight.
And let's move on to talk about some fights that's happening coming up. And I'm going to split these fights up between everyone just to cut down on some time here. Let's start off with just say the fight that folks are not talking about, who are not, that's not getting as much attention as most. I'll go to you on this one, Daniel, and that is the return of Sergey Kovalev. We all know Kovalev's career at like heavyweight, multiple time world champion, right? Making his return to the ring at cruiserweight. Is going to be fighting on Triller against a guy by the name of, and let me get this name correctly pronounced, Tervel Pulev. Don't know much about Pulev, Daniel, admittedly, but from what I've seen of him on video, if Kovalev is not at least halfway on his game, I could see Pulev, because he's a good boxer, decent power, and you just don't know how Kovalev is going to look at this age, fighting at a significantly higher weight. Put it this way, I wouldn't be surprised if Pulev were to defeat Kovalev. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is the fight where you could probably see Sergey formally be put to pasture in a way, unfortunately, because this is a dramatic jump. I think this is probably the most dramatic jump you can make in the weight classes that actually has a weight limit, going from light heavyweight to cruiserweight. We do not acknowledge bridgerweight, but this is going to be the sign that shows how far has Sergey's skills deteriorated. Because I've seen footage of Pulev. Yes, he's a fairly good boxer. He can handle himself well in the ring. However, if this would have been the Sergey Kovalev of 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there would have been no shot. He wouldn't have had no shot against that Sergey Kovalev. This Sergey Kovalev, coming off, obviously, not an exemplary comeback in the ring, coming off issues, unfortunately, outside of the ring, and really in a clouded way, what's going to happen to him in his future. I have a feeling, unfortunately, that Sergey, this is probably going to be the fight that will put him out to pasture. And it'll be a sad end to a career if he decides to hang it up afterwards. But at a certain point, it's just too much.
Over in France, Gail, fight that's been talked about a lot, kind of pushed on again, off again, back on again. Fight is going to happen, I believe, on ESPN Plus, and a heavyweight that gets talked about a lot by hardcore heads, but most mainstream guys haven't seen him, and that is Tony Yoka. Yoka signed a co-promotional deal with Top Rank a few years ago. When you look back at the crop that was the 2016 heavyweight Olympic class or super heavyweight Olympic class, he was the dude. Won a gold medal, as a matter of fact. Had a layoff due to a positive drug test. He's back on the scene now. He's fighting regularly, being trained by Andre Ward's former trainer. Help me out here. Virgil Hunter. Fighting Martin Bakole. Both of these guys are ranked in the top 15 in heavyweight. Yoka has wanted a step-up fight. He gets it now. Bakole's just as big, just as long as he is. How do you think that Yoka will do, Gail? And is probably not only just a step up his performance, but he's facing the best fighter of his professional career so far.
Well, and best is sort of relative. Yoka has had a fairly slow trajectory. His win in the Olympics was controversial. When have we not said an Olympic medal wasn't controversial? I mean, half the time. He defeated Joseph Parker for that medal. So there was a lot of eye raised at the time. This is a tee up for him, even though it's still a better fight than he's had in the past. But again, it's relative. He needs to look good. There's some appetite to match him against some of the other rising heavyweights. One of the disappointments of the card on Saturday was that Filip Hrgović was supposed to appear in a fight against Jihei Zhang. His father unfortunately passed away, so the replacement was Scott Alexander, a Los Angeles area heavyweight who hasn't had a fight in a year. I don't know if he's gotten work as a sparring partner. He probably has. He absolutely got smoked. So maybe we see Hrgović. Alan Babich is fighting this weekend. A very crowd-pleasing heavyweight. Probably got more bravado and entertainment value than actual skill. He's learning on the job. That's a possibility. There are some other sort of minor rising heavyweights. The European heavyweight scene needs to sort it out among themselves. So this is a step toward that. And heck, what else are you going to do on Saturday? There's a boxing card to watch from Europe. Great.
And ironically, the reason that this fight with Yoka's fight with Bakole was kind of on and off because Yoka was trying to fight Hrgović in what was to be IBF heavyweight eliminator. Fighting couldn't happen because of Yoka's team was contractually obligated to fight Bakole. They couldn't get away from that contract, right? And so this fight is back on again, and it's going to be interesting to see how Yoka does. Bakole, his manager, particularly his trainer, I should say, been talking big about how they're going to go in there over to France and knock him out. I just want to see how Yoka has progressed so far, and we'll get that test. We'll get a sign of how good Is he if he's the fighter that he is, he should win. Just because I think he's the better skilled guy and more technically sound. But Coley can punch, so we'll see what he can do here. Let's move on from there to the aforementioned Gilberto Ramirez. Jacob, we talked about him briefly. His name was mentioned in our discussion about Canelo or Bivol and Canelo. Daniel mentioned how Ramirez is fighting highly ranked by the WBA at 175, former super middleweight champion. He's fighting Dominic Boesel, who's actually number one ranked by the WBA at 175. So this is a title eliminator. I talked about how I had the pleasure of interviewing Ramirez this week. How do you think he will do against Boesel? Based on my observation quickly, Boesel is a decent fighter. First time fighting in the U.S. is going to happen in Ontario, California, airing live on DAZN. Decent skills, but I just don't think he has the power to trouble Zerto and Ramirez. Say what you want. He's a solid guy, and when he really wants to, really good body puncher. And I just don't think Boesel has anything to keep him off of him. But that's just my thoughts. Your breakdown of this fight.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think Boesel is a bad fighter, but I don't think he's the caliber of Ramirez. But that being said, Ramirez has been known to sometimes fight to the level of his competition, sometimes not use his best attributes and things of that nature. But he is a tough guy. He does win. He does have the skills. He's had a pretty good campaign at this weight. So I think it'll be a pretty. I can see like a possible like late stoppage if he can get Boesel hurt and get like a TKO. I don't. This is just kind of another stepping stone and another win to put onto his record as he approaches the iconic 50-0.
At the venue that I still will forever call StubHub, Daniel. You got a card on Showtime. The main undercard here is Jaron Bootsen is going to fight Custio Clayton. This is an IBF welterweight eliminator. Look, Clayton, solid guy, right? He got the draw against Sergey Lipinets in an interim title bout. I felt he beat Lipinets, right? If Clayton was fighting any other guy or just about any other guy in the top 10, I would give him a real chance here. But from all indications, from what we've all seen of Boots Ennis, he looks to be a special fighter with unusual talent. There seems to be no limit to what he can do. Arguably the most dynamic up and coming fighter in the sport. You want speed, he got it. He has it. You want athletic ability, he has it. You want skill, he has it. Power, one punch, head and body, he has it. Don't know anything about his chin yet, but at the very least, from an athletic standpoint, from a pure talent standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, he's right up there. He's right up there with any young fighter in the sport. I don't care what weight, what division you're talking about. Good luck to Clayton here, because outside of landing a big punch and surprising Boots with a hard shot, I just don't see Clayton winning this bout. I have Boots in this winning this all the way.
That should be the expected outcome, because this is Boots' chance to solidify himself as the next man up that should take on Errol Spence should the Bud Crawford fight not happen. Because luckily now he doesn't have to for the time being, he doesn't have to worry about Virgil being out there, possibly disrupting the apple cart. So he should be able to sail this through it. He has all the intangibles. His skill set is always great. His footwork has always worked better. The chin, like you mentioned, is the worrying part because I keep remembering that little the shot right before he took out Delorme. Delorme hit him with a hook, and it woke Boots up a little bit. And I remember saying that if it was Virgil landing that shot, there's a chance Boots is not getting up. So that's going to be the telling sign. If he gets hit again, is he going to respond the same way? Or is he going to be a little bit more hesitant? But I expect Boots to sail through. Like, this is his chance. He has to solidify himself. And like I said, should the Bud Crawford fight not happen, the IBF will make it sure that he fights Spence next.
The main event of this card at the former Step Up Center on Showtime, we're going to have everyone talking about this. I'm going to bring everyone into this breakdown, and that is the rematch between Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano for all the belts at 154 pounds. The two fought last July in Charlo's hometown of Texas. One of the best fights of 2021. Castano Gil, after getting hurt early, I believe it was the second round, was able to get underneath the length, and the length of Mel, was able to get in his chest for a good portion of the fight. Was the busier fighter throughout. He himself hurt Charlo. I think it was the fourth round, I believe it was. And Charlo hurt him again later on, I believe in round 10. But the fight ended in a draw. We both know plenty of folks within boxing, writers, pundits, or whatever, who felt that Castano won. This rematch was supposed to take place in March. Castano injured bicep. Charlo accused him of faking the injury and then suggested that he was on PEDs. So there's a lot of bad blood in the lead up. Both fighters are talking about knocking each other out. Do you think that Castano Gale, how can I put this? Was this the case that Castano fought his best fight in that first fight and Charlo didn't? And do you think that Castano could improve from that first fight? Or did we just see the best of him in that disputed draw?
I think we saw the exact nature of Brian Castano, not better than expected, not worse than expected. He is very confident going into this rematch. The accusations of ducking, that's just sort of gamesmanship, that's what happens. I am frankly very surprised that Charlo agreed to stage this fight in California, where there's going to be a predominantly Mexican-American audience roaring for Castano. Charlo will not get a warm reception there at all. Perhaps he's counting on decent judging, and he has had very successful fights in California. He won his rematch against Tony Harrison here. So maybe he's counting on that. I just still find it a very curious venue. I love the venue, but if I am Charlo in his camp, that wouldn't have been my choice. But that won't be an excuse entirely if he loses. He is really going to have to step on the gas. Castano is a pressure action fighter, volume puncher. He's going to bring it, and Charlo is going to either have to make it a tactical fight, which I don't really see, or respond in kind. Can he do it? His back is to the wall, which makes this a really fascinating fight. I am very much looking forward to seeing what happens. I don't think it looks good for Charlo. I think Castano will win again. Well, I shouldn't say win again. I think Castano will win. I think he will make that draw stick.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Charlo tried to use the jab in that first fight. He tried to stick with that jab the entire night, but there were points where the jab was not working. Castano was able to get underneath it, slip it, and then go to the body, hurt Charlo with left hooks and right hands. If he couldn't consistently get off with the jab in the first fight, does that spell trouble for him coming up in this rematch?
It can. It can, because Castano has now seen the blueprint firsthand of what can hurt Jermell. And I'm just as surprised as Gail is that they actually are having this fight at StubHub, where they'll take on, where my experience has been, they'll take any Latino fighter that has good chance at open arms, and they'll take that Argentino very well in open arms. And this is going to be a talent fight. I know Charlo, he's come out and said, "Oh, I was being the superstar the first time around. This time the hard work will pay off." And you better pray that's the case, because Castano is used to being the underdog. He's still the underdog in this fight. And there's still a sentiment that he probably should have won the first fight. So the question now is going to be is, can Mel land better combinations? Can Mel establish the jab a little bit more forcefully in order to prevent Castano from getting in, from landing those body shots, and let him control the ring? If he can't do that again, or if his jab is not as crisp, or if he tries to make it into a dogfight because he feels he has to, I can see Castano winning this before the ring. But these guys are pretty evenly matched. I really would not be surprised if we see another draw. I really wouldn't.
Your thoughts, Jacob?
Yeah, so I actually think that Charlo is going to stop Castano. And the reason I think that is that I think Charlo, the shots that he hurt Castano with, and that he landed in that second round, and I think it was the 10th or 11th round, they wobbled Castano pretty badly, or they had more effect than the shots that landed from Castano to Charlo that that hurt him. So, and I think kind of like most Charlo fights, he kind of fights in this. I think he has some skills, but for some reason he just doesn't he fights very just passive. And then it's kind of like when the fight gets later on, then he lands that punch, which he almost did in that first fight, in that the 10th, 11th round, where he basically landing all these shots. I think he's gonna look to do what he try to do, use his jab, but look to counter Castano when he comes in, and look for that opening, and possibly put him out. But I also don't think that the crowd is going to be. I think the crowd might be a little bit evenly split, and the reason I say that is because I've been, and I will be at the fight, so I'll be able to take in my first live fight in a while. So I'm excited about that at the StubHub. But I've been there for fights before, and the circles that Charlo runs in, which is like the Gervonta Davis and Spence circles, they actually have a pretty good representation at those fights. So I think it's going to be split, like kind of what Daniel said before, and Gail, that it is Southern California, so there's usually there's a Mexican on the card, you know, and they're fighting whoever they're fighting, you know, the crowd goes for the Mexican fighter, right? Their countrymen. But I think there's going to be a lot of people that show up for this because the first fight was so good. A lot of Charlo fans are going to show up and, you know, make their voices heard, and that'll make for an exciting atmosphere though too. So I mean, if the fight even is as half as good as the first fight, and you know, exciting, and then you have half the crowd, you know, kind of going back and forth and oohing and ahhing, I think that's going to make for a pretty good night. So I'm hoping I'm right. I'm hoping that, you know, I just want to see a good fight. At the end of the day, I don't really have any stake on, you know, who wins, and I don't really care. But I just want to see a good competitive fight, hopefully with some high drama like StubHub likes to bring, you know. So I'm hoping the magic is in the air and we see another one for the ages.
That's all I want for the end as well. I thought you was going to say something, Gail. I don't think she was, but that's all I want in the end as well. I just want the fight to be as good as the first one, and I just hope it lives up to the reputation that we usually put it this way. StubHub has a reputation of always, because of their venue, because of the atmosphere. It always seems that you'll have a good fight there. That venue seems to bring out the best in fighters, and I hope that continues to be the case for this upcoming fight. It is a bit of surprise here that Charlo has agreed to have this fight at that venue. Look for Castano to have the crowd to be in Castano's favor here. Charlo in interviews has said he's not worried about it. His main focus is leaving the ring with his hand raised in victory. I want to see how both men adjust to this fight. Can Castano fight at a higher level? Can Charlo make the adjustments to basically keep Castano off of him? If he does not, he will be in for another tough fight. But if he can, he has a chance to Jacob's point of not just winning, but winning in a rather dominant fashion. So yeah, that's just me. I want a good fight, and I'm not going to make a prediction here. I just want a good fight, just like I wanted a good fight for when it came to Taylor and Serrano a couple of weeks ago. I had that similar attitude. I'm going to go around the panel here. First of all, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. Olaf, Yolanda Cortez, if you like what you heard this evening, please make sure to hit that like button. Please make sure you are subscribed to the show as well. I'm going to go around the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News and NY Fights. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to hit you up in terms of media training and whatnot, and what it is, all things media. For those who want to check you out occasionally on TMZ Live, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
I'm especially about the whatnot, so you can contact me on all social. I'm under either my name or PR Pro San Diego. I write for the growing and mighty team of Avengers at nyfights.com. We're old school boxing with a new attitude. And I'm looking forward to this weekend's events. And just a quick PS to all. You probably already know this because I know you're all been glued to the presidential elections in the Philippines. But it looks like Manny Pacquiao did not win, did not come close. And I predict he'll come back to the ring.
Oh wow! Leaving you with that teaser, I'll go to you, Jacob. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk film, let the folks know where they can hit. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me on the show. I could be hit up on Twitter at JRATM23, and like I said, I'll be at the fights. One of the fights. I know we have 3 fights in the LA area: Ontario, Forum, and Inglewood, and then the real place. You know, my favorite venue, the StubHub. But I'll be there. So, if you want to contact me or whatever, we can have a beer together or whatever, enjoy the fights.
And last but certainly not least, I go to you, Daniel. And you can check out Jacob's stuff on Jab Hook Boxing. I forgot to mention that. I go to you, Daniel, from 4Boxing News in the Inscriber for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially as it pertains to the Miami Heat, who blew out the Sixers this evening in Game 5 of second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, unfortunately, I now fully expect the NBA to either put Tony Brothers or Scott Foster or Ed Malloy on the referee chart to could make this go 7. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter RWKZ99. Find me there. Like I said, Musk hasn't banned us all yet, but definitely catch me on there because it's gonna be interesting to see what's gonna happen. Like you mentioned in the Philippines, because it's not really a matter of how many lost, it's who he lost to that's probably a worrying sign for him.
For those who want to talk boxing, sports, boxing, fitness, music, you know what it is with me, Brother JR, at Brother JR76 on Twitter, Brother JRSC on IG. As I said at the beginning of the show, you can check out all things Pound for Pound Box Report on the site itself, p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us, you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you will find links to where to check us out all over social media. We can check out the podcast on all podcast platforms, be it Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, anywhere and everywhere else in between. Links to where you can donate if you want to do so. $1, $2, $5, $10, it wouldn't matter. I will appreciate any and all donations, help the overall production behind the scenes. Also links to Beachbody on Demand, where once again, I strongly urge you to check that out. At the very least, check out the 2-week, the 14-day free trial. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Charlo Castano rematch. We will do a recap of Jaron Boots Ennis and his battle against Custio Clayton. Also, recap of Zerto Ramirez and his fight against Boesel, as well as Sergey Kovalev and his fight against Pulev, and Tony Yoka in his fight against Martin Bacoli. And we will do a preview of lots of fights that's happening on the weekend of the 21st. Jonathan Alakamuli, who's talking big smack on Twitter about when it comes to the middleweight division. He's fighting Danny Dignam for the WBO interim 160-pound title. That's going to be on ESPN on the undercard of that. Jermell Herring makes his return to the ring as he fights Jermaine Ortiz. Herring moving up to the lightweight division. Also on that same evening of the 21st, you have David Benavidez fighting David Lemieux for the vacant WBC interim belt at 168 pounds. And that's going to be on Showtime over in the UK, in London to be specific. On DAZN, Joshua Buatsi is facing Craig Richards. Chantel Cameron, she's defending her WBC IBF junior welterweight titles on the undercard of that. Also, Tevin Farmer, I believe he's fighting Mickey Bay in Accra, Ghana. So yeah, lots and lots of bouts happening on the 21st. We will try to preview as many of those fights as possible. So yeah, this has been episode 162 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. Again, want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. For Gail from Communities Digital News and NY Fights, for Daniel of 4Boxing News and the Inscriber, for Jacob of Jab Hook. I'm your host, Michael. We will see you all guys next time. Everyone have a good one. Good night.